something going up on the road. So as Paul brought up yesterday, I kind of went through and set up what I planned to do. And basically 9 lessons, what I've got planned. Now, that also equivalents to about 15 women. So, some of them I combined up, they're just a little bit to tell, but they're enough in there that some of them tie together that we need to take a look at them. If the Lord take time to put them in the scriptures, maybe there's a reason we should look. And tonight, we'll look at some women who were not named and had faith. And all we know is what they did. We don't know the name. Now, I've kind of put this point here, really not looking at Peter's wife, but just as an introduction, or Peter's wife's mother. It's kind of interesting. All we know about Peter's wife and her mother is that she was white, Peter's wife. This was his mother-in-law. No names about it. They're not mentioned. And it's just a point where when they enter into the house, when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. So he touched her hand and the fever left her. And she rose and served him. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon possessed, and he cast out the spirits with the word and healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. The point that we want to look at here is Peter's wife's mother is a little different than the other three we're going to look at tonight. She didn't approach Jesus. Evidently, they go to Peter's house, and here she is, sick. And Jesus decides to heal her. The other three we're going to look at tonight, each came to Jesus looking for something. And it's kind of interesting when we think about them. The first one we want to look at is this woman who had an issue of blood. That's the way it's described. Notice, so Jesus went with him here in the middle of this introduction, because you have to kind of tie that in. There is a keeper of the synagogue. Luke names him Jairus. And he comes to Jesus wanting his daughter healed and begging Jesus to come to the house. And in the middle of this, as they're going, this multitude follows him. And this woman approaches. Now notice, a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. Now folks, that sounds like sometimes today. Maybe that's why God's putting that in there, so we just don't get discouraged and keep trusting Him no matter what doctors. Because sometimes we go to the doctor, and we don't get any answers. Just a bit. Jean's going and nodding her head. Been there, done it. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment, for she said, If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Now, what does that tell us about this woman?
Faith.
Faith. How much faith?
Great faith.
Great faith. I want you to think about the various miracles that we know about, like the paralytic. What happened with him? They lowered him down through the roof and you know, wanted Jesus to heal him. What they wanted Jesus to pronounce a healing or touch him and heal him, do something for him. And the reason I'm bringing that up is just like this guy Jairus is wanting him to come and heal his daughter, physically him do something. And this woman says, if I can just touch his clothes, I'll be okay. You remember what Jesus said about faith as a grain of mustard seed? And immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? Old King James says, who touched me? Now that's interesting too. That kind of tells us something. God doesn't do something without knowing about it. You think that Jesus already knew she was in the crowd and was coming? Yeah. Sometime look up John's account of the feeding of the 5,000. It says he asked Philip the question, how shall we feed these people? Knowing what he was about to do. He knew that the power went out, that it was there for her. But was it going to heal her without her doing anything? No, she had to come. But his disciple said to him, you see the multitude thronging you, and you say, who touched me? You got the multitude bunching up against you. What do you mean, who touched you? Who didn't touch you? Kind of thought that they're having. They don't understand. And notice, and he looked around to see her who had done this thing.
That shows he knew.
Oh, he knew. And that's one of them. And what he knew by looking at her, after he yells, who touched me, what's he telling her? I know. and he's telling her he wants to know. And notice, but the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. What she's afraid of. What she's really afraid of.
Maybe that he's angry with her because he took some of his.
Possible that she just touched him and didn't ask him. Perhaps that is her fear. She's worried. What's going to happen now? You know, we got to put things in light. We look back at Jesus and we see all the love and compassion that's within him. But what were rulers a lot of times like? What do we see people today that get a lot of notoriety going for them?
I'm very arrogant.
Some are very arrogant. Some are very unwilling to talk to people. You know,
If she respected him as the Son of God, she believed that, and she had any experience with some of the Old Testament things that have occurred, I'd be hesitant to walk up and touch Jesus.
yeah. I mean, especially if you understand.
It could go the wrong way.
Well, the belief that, well, he's healing people, and he's got the power to heal, all I got to do is touch the garment. But see, here's what you got to think about what she's trying to do. She's just wanting to touch the hem of the garment, be healed, and go about her own little way. Kind of a sneak attack.
But he wanted to glorify God in everything he did. That's why he let everything be known. And that would have been in secret and silence if he hadn't.
Well, there was one time he healed somebody, told him not to tell anybody.
She may have not thought herself worthy.
That's possible. She may have not thought herself worthy to actually speak, to talk to him.
All I
And we
know-
gotta understand, what kind of society was that?
Male dominated.
Male dominant. Women just didn't walk up, talk to men that they didn't know.
She wasn't worthy.
In her mind, there's a lot of things, and her deal of it is, if I'm gonna touch them garment, I'll be healed, and I can go, and there won't be no big deal about it. And maybe she didn't want a big deal made about it. You know, maybe she was somebody who didn't want to go through telling what all had happened to her.
There are so many unknown variables in this thing. For example, Jesus knows everything. He knew who touched him, if he wanted to know who touched him, you know.
Well, and
He
and she
didn't
would be
have to
considered
ask that
unclean.
question.
it was, you know, you just brought up a good point. She would have been considered unclean under the law.
And by touching him, she would have made it where he could
Him
have gone
unclean.
He wasn't like,
he would have been unclean. He would have been able to go in the temple.
Yeah. So here's a lot of things that we have to realize, and Ray, you're right, there's a lot of variables. And here's what we know. She was afraid of him knowing she touched him. But when he knew, and we know that he would have known anyway, but the point of it is, he wanted people to realize the faith that she had. That's why he turned around and touched him. Let them know. But notice this, and he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction.
It's possible also that she wanted to be healed, but she didn't want any further contact. I mean, I'm not saying that it could be, but, you know. I've heard some people say that.
I don't know that she had the faith.
She had faith to be healed.
Yeah, and I think she had faith in him. Luke's account says that she fell down and worshiped him. So it's kind of a point there, but here's the big deal. You remember the centurion that wanted his son healed and went to him and he said, I'll come to your house. People urged him, and the centurion said, I too command people. I don't expect you to come. I send people in their direction and everything. Basically, I believe if you get to the point that you can heal him from here, you don't have to be in his presence, which Jesus did. And he made a point. There wasn't such great faith. He hadn't found any faith that great in Israel. And I think that's the point here. This woman was an example of her faith that said, you know, I don't have to be in the forefront of everybody.
She was humble and very meek.
Humble and meek, and you know, I've seen people get upset over somebody opening private baptism. You ever know somebody that wanted private baptism? I've done several of them.
Well, I've known the people who wanted to be baptized, and it was more or less private because of when it happened.
Yeah, I've had that, and I've had people that have approached me, I want to take care of this. And what it was, their personality, they didn't want a big fuss made. Ron?
One other interesting observation to me was that she had heard reports of him before she came. And so her faith was generated from hearing the good news.
Hearing that he could heal, hearing that he was there to heal.
And it's the same way that we are saved. We hear it, believe it, and we act on it.
And you know, that's something we need to think about. Because we do, so many times we look at these people and we think, well, you know, they were seeing miracles, of course they believed. This woman heard and believed. Just like we do. We take the testimony of the witnesses and believe.
Also, she had been sick for so many years, had tried so many things, and she didn't say, I'm going to go do this and maybe this will work.
No, she had.
She had every reason in the world to say, maybe this will work. She said this will work.
Yeah, she had made up in her mind, and this is inspired in scripture, so we know this is what was in her mind, that if I just touch his garment, I'll be healed. All we gotta do. Kind of reminds me of Paul in one of the places in Acts, people were just bringing him clothes of the sick. And he was touching them and the people being healed.
It also suggests that she may have not been the first one that had touched his clothes and been healed.
And may not have, but she's the example he chose to give us. And it's a reminder of how great our faith can be. How about a Gentile? This is an interesting one in the fact that the things that she says, the things that she looks at what Jesus says to her. Now, if you're living in Israel in that time, you're a Gentile, what do you think? What was about the only thing worse than a Gentile?
Pig.
A pig, that's about it. In fact, I think it was a close race. In the Jewish mind, you know, and when you read that part in Galatians chapter 3 where Paul says there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, you got to put that into the mind of those Judaizing teachers and their little prayer of giving thanks that they were one, that they were a Jew, and that they were a free man, and that they were a man and not a woman. Does that tell you how they looked at people? The only way this woman could have been any worse was if she'd been a slave. And when Jesus leaves Galilee, goes out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and behold, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, son of David. My daughter is severely demon oppressed. Why did they call him son of David?
What he was.
Well, he was the son of David, David's house, but that was reserved for one person. Who was it? The Messiah. The Messiah was to be called the son of David. So was she affirming in her belief already
That he was the Messiah.
that he was the Messiah? And notice it says, but he answered her not a word, and his disciples came to urge him, saying, Send her away, for she cries out after us. Why does he not answer her? That's kind of a thought we need to kind of realize.
I think he's trying to teach the disciples a lesson.
He's trying to teach them.
Well, he's probably not, at the moment in time, he may not be ready to be recognized, possibly, and so maybe he's, I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but he's not.
This is not long before he asked Peter who they say he is. But here's more deal. She's a Gentile. What's culture say?
He wasn't supposed to talk.
Culture, he wasn't supposed to talk to her. And perhaps what he's trying to do is show them where they're culturally wrong. But, we kind of get the idea that Gentiles sometimes, and especially in their time frame, what did they think about Gentiles receiving the gospel?
Well, he had told them that or it had been prophesied that the law would go out from Zion to the Jews first, and then to the Samaritans, and then to the Gentiles.
Well, it prophesied, but here's the reality. I'm not talking about him. What about in the mind of them?
Mine had changed probably.
Their mind was still, hey, the kingdom is for
I
Israel.
mean, Peter proved that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
He was an apostle, but he couldn't, you know.
he didn't fully understand.
Deal with the Gentiles.
And we have to understand, you know, probably before Philip goes up to Samaria, it's probably been about 10 years is the estimation since his death. And then on top of that, then you got about another 10 years before is the estimation before Peter goes to Cornelius. How did the Pharisees act toward the Gentiles even after he went to them? Oh, you still got to become a proselyte before you be a Christian.
You got to be circumcised.
Segregated. So I think his point of him is he wanted her to be pushy. So it gave him an opportunity to teach. But he answered, said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshiped him, saying, Lord, help me. Who was to be worshipped? Who was to be worshipped?
God alone.
God alone. So you got to understand, she's falling down and worship him. Why? Messiah was to be worshipped. She sees him as the Messiah. She's worshiping him. And she's pleading, but he answered, said, it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Isn't that true? You can't feed your children, what are you doing with the dog? Notice what she said, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table.
God had to help her with that remark.
God had help with that. That's possible. Or just some points, maybe she saw some dogs eating some crumbs and that immediately came to it. Now, here's a point that Jesus is making this analogy is kind of taking the culture. The children of Israel, the Israelites saw the Gentiles basically as dogs. And he uses that relationship.
And she doesn't argue with it.
And she doesn't argue with him because she knows that's the culture. She just makes a point of, but even we get a little bit, does it rain on the just and the unjust? Did not God's blessings fall upon the sinner as well as the righteous? Some of them. She's kind of pointing out to him, we may not be the chosen people, but we still get blessings from God.
And it is true that God, to a degree, had some special things for the Jews. Even Paul, when he went to preach, he said, I go to the Jews first, then also to the Greeks. That God had a special place in his heart for those people, and all as bad as they were.
Well, you know, they were to be his children.
And for a long time.
And as he pointed out to Jonah about Nineveh, so were they his children. Now, it's kind of a point trying to get them to the idea. I think this is an example trying to get his disciples to the idea. The reason Jesus is making go the way, and she's coming to him, and he's using it. Trying to teach them that eventually you're going to have to accept the Gentile as part of the kingdom. And notice that Jesus answered and said to her, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire." And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Here's another one. She didn't ask him to come to. She asked him to heal her. She didn't beg for him to come and go with her to her house. She said, "Have mercy and heal her."
She had faith that he would have mercy.
He had faith that she would have mercy if she was persistent. Jesus even told of a parable, read a parable, I was reading that yesterday, told a parable of a king who a woman kept going to him and going to him, trying to get what was rightfully hers. And finally, he said, "I'll help her." And somebody said, "Why?" He says, "Because she's about to drive me crazy," paraphrasing it. She's not going to stop. This one was persistent. If we really believe in something, are we going to be persistent? What did James say about Elijah? It was a nature like ours. He prayed for rain. That text in there, James chapter 5, when he says, "Effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." And then he goes on that Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, who fervently prayed that it would not rain. And it did not rain for 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again and it rained. When you look at the Greek in that, it puts Elijah as a man who was constantly praying and constantly praying. Consistent in his prayer life. Look at this woman. Her persistence showed her faith. Notice, let it to be you as you desire. Didn't have to go. You think that a woman like that, what would happen after the cross and they hear the gospel as a Gentile, being preached to a Gentile, being accepted? Sunday night we mentioned that they've been without a prophet for over 400 years, and then their testimony period. By the time John the Baptist comes on, they're looking for a prophet. They're praying for a prophet. They're ready to hear a prophet. Jesus spends 3.5 years on this earth as prophet and Messiah, preaching and teaching the good news, doing miracles, and people like this hearing and obeying, pleading. What was he doing? He was preparing for the kingdom. I think sometimes we forget about farmers. And I want to use an example because these people were looking, they were believing, they were wanting. Sometimes we've got to get people to understand they need to look and want and desire. And sometimes we need to go back and look at it. And look at our faith. James commends Elijah about his prayer life, but what did Elijah do at one point? He ran and hid in a cave. What was he having? Really, what was it? Huh?
Second thought.
Question of faith. He wasn't saying, he wasn't giving up on believing on God, but you know what? He was in fear for his life.
Wonder what will happen.
Is God going to let this woman kill me? Lord, and basically that's what it is, you know. That's really what he was doing there. One day he's destroying 450 prophets of Baal, and then one woman sends him to hide in a cave. He was having a question of faith. And God reaffirmed it for him. This one was an example to us that, you know, even when we are going bad, even that other one, when nothing's going the way we think, don't give up on our faith. And there's a last one. Because I think she's the one we ought to look at the most. How important is it to be healed of a disease when it's life-threatening?
Very important.
Okay? Keep that thought in mind. Then one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, and he went to the Pharisee's house and sat down to eat. And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil and stood at his feet behind him weeping. And she began to wash his feet with her tears and wiped them with her head as she kissed his feet and anointed them with the fragrant oil. Why is she weeping? She was a sinner. And she's a little different from most. Remember when Jesus was in the boat and told them to cast their net on the other side, but they caught nothing, and they started pulling in all these fish. Peter looked at him and said, "Get away from me, I'm a sinner." I'm not, basically saying, I'm not worthy to be in your presence. But this woman wasn't, she didn't feel she was worthy of being present. But I think she was very sorrowful and looking for forgiveness. And realized that she needed to be sorrowful. I noticed when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he spoke to him saying, "This man, if he were a prophet, would know who and what manner of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner." We ever get like that? Afraid to touch somebody? And Jesus answered and said to him, "Simon, I have something to say to you." So he said, "Teacher, say it." And I've looked at this sometimes and I've come to the conclusion this is probably the biggest hypocrite in the lifetime of Jesus. One minute he's saying, well, if he was really a prophet, he wouldn't be doing this. But when Jesus says, "I've got something to say to you," what does he do? He calls him, "Teacher, say it." He only invited Jesus to his house just to be able to say that he came. He says, "There was a certain creditor who had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. And when they had nothing with which to repay, he freely forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him more? Which should love him more? The one that owed him more." That's what it ain't a guarantee, because we've seen people that like that didn't take it for granted, but the reality of it is, in general, that should be true. And Simon answered and said, "I suppose the one whom he forgave more." And he said to him, "You have rightly judged." Simon probably feeling pretty good at himself right now, right? But notice he goes on. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I entered your house and you gave me no water for my feet. Now there's a big deal right there. Culturally, hospitality said you were to provide water for people to wash their feet. If you had servants, you were to provide a servant to wash their feet. And not to do so was an insult to the guest. I think Simon's really telling what he thinks about Jesus, just in his actions. And Jesus pointed it out. He says, but she has washed my feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. You gave me no kiss, but this woman has not ceased to kiss my feet since the time I came in. What was the point of the kiss? A greeting of welcome. You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil. You question this woman and what she's doing. Jesus tell him, I know your thoughts. You're questioning me letting this woman do what she's doing, and you haven't even provided me with the common courtesies of the day.
If she was so unworthy, why did that man have her in his home to begin with?
It would seem she came in on her own.
That's strange,
but-
though. It
I
sounds like she
understand, but it was
accustomed
probably
to
a point
being-
that Jesus didn't restrain her.
But it sounds like she was accustomed to being there and he knew
And
her.
could be.
Criticize her.
Could be. This is all we know about the woman. Yeah, we don't know. But she was there. It says, therefore I say to you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little. I want you to stop there. What do you just tell that man?
She knows me more than you do.
She loves me more than you do, and she's seeking forgiveness of sins, and she'll have it. What are you gonna have? He's thinking he's not a sinner, but he's even his faith is telling them, even though you think you only have a few sins, not even those few sins you think you got, you're not going to be forgiven. No, then he said to her, your sins are forgiven. He didn't say that to Simon. And
He
those who
doesn't say
said
the
it,
sign of your faith has saved you, go in peace either.
huh?
He doesn't say the sign of your faith has saved
No,
you.
you're reading ahead, but no, he doesn't say that either. Because what would the point? Because he has no faith. He might say, we don't know, he might have told him your lack of faith is going to cost your soul. In one aspect, he's telling him that. It's unsaid, but by what he said to her, and by what he did say to him, he's telling him you're still in your sins. Just because you think you don't have any. What did John say about the one who says he don't have any sins?
Deceivers.
Deceives himself and makes God a liar. Now their big question was, who is this who he forgives him? Guess what? Guess what they didn't say?
They were in a learning curve.
They were in a learning curve, but they didn't say, who is this that thinks he has the right to forgive sin? In fact, they're acknowledging that he's forgiven sins. And accepted that they were being forgiven. Unlike those at the paralytic who said, only God has the power to forgive sins. That's an interesting study itself, because which did he do first? Forgive his sins or heal them? The paralytic. Then he said to the woman, your faith has saved you, as Stephen said. Go in peace.
forgave his sins first, and then he asked him a question, which is easier to do.
Which is easier to do. And the mind of a man, which is easier to do. Anybody can say they're forgiven sins. Where's the proof? Because that's what he said. So that you know I have the power to forgive sins. The Son of Man has the power on earth to forgive sins. Take up your bed and walk. The proof that he forgave it, was able to forgive his sins, was in the miracle of him getting up and walking. And that's why he did it in reverse. Now, I asked about when you have a disease, how important is it to get healed? What's the worst disease you can have? Sin. That's why I arranged it this way. I think God's trying to get it to a cross. He wants to heal us. But everybody that gets healed, what eventually happens to them? Of sicknesses.
Get something else.
Get something else. Lazarus got raised from the dead. What eventually happened to Lazarus? Died again.
Is that the second death?
No, that's not the second death he's talking about. No, but that was a good one, Ron.
For him, it could have been, he has the third one potentially.
Well, I got, that could be a whole different study. I got asked one time was it possible for Lazarus to lose his salvation? I'm not talking about that. In the scripture, we would have to say if he has free will, after he was resurrected, he could have still fell away. But I said, I don't think God would have raised anybody that would have fell away. Now, on top of that, if you had died and seen the other side, the truth of the matter, your faith had been fulfilled, you're going to mess it up now.
It was, yeah, it's hard to say how that worked because it was before the church.
Adam's sin.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, but
you
what we're
walked
talking
around.
about is,
I'm just saying,
yes, Adam sinned. He was in the Garden of Eden. He sinned, but he didn't see what Lazarus saw.
it's man's nature. He
It's
could walk
man.
around.
I'm not saying that Lazarus led a sinless life, but I'm saying he led a faithful life. I believe he led a faithful life. Let me put it that way.
He had insight the rest of us will never have.
And you know, it's interesting, of all those people, Lazarus and all the others that was resurrected and all those that were, graves were opened after the resurrection of Christ. I don't know what they told the people of that day, but guess what God saw fit for them to write down and tell us? Nothing. The only glimpse we get of death is when Jesus talks about the rich man and Lazarus, the beggar. That's really the only glimpse we get of the other side.
Hey,
But it's important.
I've got a side question.
Well, before you do, let me finish my point, because
Finish your point, I'll ask you after church.
everything that happens that we get so worried about that can take our physical lives here, what's the one thing that's guaranteed? One day we're going to die. And I'm not advocating, don't be praying for people healed, don't be trying to get healed. Okay? What I am saying is, what's more important is to have the forgiveness of sins. To be in that right relationship with God, to be living pleasing to God. Because guaranteed, one day we're all going to die. And if we don't die, we're going to live long enough to see us coming. And then the judgment. Okay, Stephen, your question.
I'm trying to look it up now. I know many men, some of the faithful got them walking around the dead roads. Was it a temporary walkabout? And they jump back in their grave?
I don't think
Or
so.
they just stick around? Because I don't remember,
It doesn't
I don't
say.
hear any more about them. And I didn't know if they just popped in and said hi to folks.
You're talking about Matthew's account, chapter 27.
That's what I was trying to look at right there, but I couldn't remember.
I think a lot of times we miss the point of this too, because what happens here when this all happens, we kind of take it at the cross because it's kind of a sub thought that advances and then comes back. It's start at verse 50 of chapter 27. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up the spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Now here's two things that happened, two different episodes. When he died, the veil of the temple ripped from top to bottom. Why is it important to understand that it was ripped from top to bottom?
God did it.
Proves God did it. You ever look at how tall the temple was? You think the ceiling's high? It was higher. And to come from the top, well, no man did it. Okay? And at the same time, there was an earthquake and rocks were split and graves were open. And they were raised. When did they go into the city?
After his resurrection.
After his resurrection. They hung around there till he rose from the dead. What's the point of them being raised? The people that saw them and knew they had been dead, and probably in their graves for some time, when they heard that Jesus raised, they believed it. But why wait till after the resurrection? Why wait till after Jesus resurrected?
Because he was the first one.
He is firstborn of the dead. If people see them too soon, they start running out there to see about him. God wanted them as an affirmation that he raised, not as a prequel to him being raised. They confirmed his resurrection
So they could testify.
so they could testify to it. So that if you went and say, Grandma, been dead for 20 years, shows up at your door, and you know it's Grandma,
What do you think she's told? You know what I'm saying? I mean, they would have came with a message.
well, I'm sure they, and probably somewhere along the line, what you hear about Jesus being the Messiah, you need to believe it.
But we really don't.
We really don't know. We're speculating. We're taking some creative licensing.
There's that word.
That's what you were looking for the other night. It hit me yesterday. Creative licensing.
That's it.
But the truth of the matter is, they told them something but that. Well, one thing we know they were doing was confirming that there was a resurrection. And I guarantee you, it was just like Peter and John. When those women came back and said, the grave's open and it's empty, what did Peter and John do? They ran to the grave to see. And I guarantee you, when them people are saying, coming in, and even though they recognized them, some of them were probably like Rhoda when Peter escaped from Herod, thought they'd seen a ghost. But when they proved to them it was real, they went and checked the grave. And here they are open. And notice the point of the centurion. All this was to affirm that he was the Son of God and that there was a resurrection, or is a resurrection. Now they, like Lazarus, I don't think God does. If they were raised from the dead, they weren't just called out of the grave to make a vision like Saul saw with Samuel or on the Mount of Transfiguration. It just wasn't their spirit. It was their actual body. The spirit was reunited. That's what really resurrection means, reunited with the body. And they walked about. Which means until how many more years, I don't know, that they would live their life until they died again. Physical death. Not the second death. Of damnation. So, that answers your question best I can. Any other questions, comments? Anything on these three women?
The first one immediately started serving. She was very grateful and ready to be a servant.
Mm-hmm. Definitely started serving. The last one was very grateful. With tears. I think
She was serving ahead of time.
it's kind of a point, don't wait until you're forgiven to start doing what you can. If you really want to be forgiven. Her remorse for her sins, when was it?
Well, she was like most, like sinners should be. They become remorseful for their sins when they realize who Jesus is. And then they go forward to accept it.
And I think that point comes back to when we really understand what sin does to us and God. That's where the remorse really comes in. The displeasing. Ron and Paul. And
A.W. Tozier said in his book, Knowledge of the Holy, that the gospel could relieve the huge burden of sin. Just tons and tons of weight weighing down on a person. They could relieve that burden of sin. But unless the burden was felt, the gospel didn't do any good.
yeah. Until you recognize what you're
And
saying.
that's kind of what that Pharisee, he didn't feel that burden, but she did.
And she felt the full weight of it.
She felt the full weight of it and realized, who she was and what she was.
The first part of chapter 8 is about Mary Magdalene, but there are many, well, I don't know many, but some people equate this lady with Mary Magdalene, saying that she was the sinful
Yeah.
prostitute or whatever, but there's no reason in my mind to equate the two.
I think, and this is just opinion, I think if it had been Mary Magdalene, she would have been named as being this woman.
But you'll be surprised it's out there.
Oh, yeah, it's out there. In fact, Catholicism teaches that. Huh?
What did you say?
Catholicism teaches it as fact that this was Mary Magdalene.
Chapter
This
8,
woman.
first few verses, talk about her.
The one that Jesus cast out the 7 demons.
Yeah.
Is it possible? It's possible, but I don't see any reason to get to that conclusion. Number 909.
909.
Let's stand and sing 909.
There's a fountain free, 'tis for you and me, let us say so, may